everyone.
Welcome back again.
Excited to be back here for our last session of our first full day of sessions of the Seed to Harvest Summit. Have you guys been enjoying this? Let us know in the chat. It's been a lot of fun.
Have you learned anything today?
Yeah. Have you learned anything new? That's a good question. It'd be kind of cool if you put it in the chat. What did you learn that was new today? We're all learning. I learned some new stuff today. That's the cool thing about gardening is it's like this endless horizon. You just continue learning new things as time goes on. All right, so quick welcome to anyone. If this is your first live session with us, a huge welcome to you. Quick little housekeeping here. We're going to share a little sponsor spotlight, and then we have a very special guest, Joe Lampel, that's going to be coming on very shortly. We'll introduce him in a few minutes. He's got a fantastic presentation for you all tonight. I think you're going to absolutely love it. And we're going to end with a Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up at the end. So that's a quick little overview of how this goes. Our sponsor for today is Grow Right Garden Beds, and they have just designed one of the simplest, easiest to put together beds possible for raised gardens, basically. And they last for like 20 years, and there's a whole bunch of really cool features. And if you get one during the summit through the Seedtime store, there's a link down on the live page here. If you jump over to the Seedtime store and get one there, you will get a bonus soil moisture meter with your raised garden bed. So fun little extra there for you. All right, I'm going to play a short little video from them, and then we'll jump back in.
Have you ever dreaded putting together a raised bed before? Well, now you don't have to. Introducing the Grow Right Garden, no tools needed, raised bed. All you have to do is take your panels, overlap them, take your rod, slide it down through the slots, and voila, you have a sturdy connection point. There's no screwdrivers, no sockets, just connect the panels and you're done in minutes. Anyone, regardless of age or skill level, can assemble the entire bed in 10 minutes or less. It's made of thick, durable, USDA regulated, paint coated steel, so it's made to last season after season. Once you're set, you're ready to plant your favorite flowers, veggies, or whatever else you like to grow. So if you're ready to make gardening simple, head over to growrightgarden.com and check out our no tools, no hassle raised bed.
Yeah, and actually, if you want that extra moisture meter, click the link down below and grab it in the Seedtime store. We have a really great relationship that we're building with them. Really fun. Justin Lane did a session earlier today. So if you've got the replays of the sessions, you want to go check that one out. All right, we'd like to go ahead and invite on Joe Lampel. Joe, it is super awesome blessing to have you join us. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It's been a long time coming. I know we've tried to coordinate our schedules in the past, and finally the stars aligned, and here we are. And I can't wait to share with you a little bit about ecological gardening tonight.
Fantastic.
We can't wait to hear.
Yeah, we are looking forward to hearing this. Just a quick little background for our viewers today. Joe Lampel is the creator, host, and executive producer of the Emmy Award-winning national PBS series, Growing a Greener World. Some of you may have watched that already. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Joe already. Founder of JoeGardner.com and creator of the new Joe Gardner Online Gardening Academy. He is also the previous host of Fresh from the Garden on the DIY Network, as well as on-air contributor to Today, Good Morning America, and the Weather Channel. You got quite the spread here, Joe. That's pretty cool. Past awards include the American Horticultural Society's B.Y. Morrison Communication Award, which recognizes effective and inspirational communication through print, radio, television, podcasts, and other online media. We are just really stoked to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah.
It is my pleasure, and you are welcome. Thanks for having me. You guys ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm going to pass it over to you. We're going to pull up your slides. For those of you in the chat, my dad and I are going to jump into the background. We'll keep an eye on your questions for the Q&A. And Joe, the time is yours.
Great. And if anything happens that I'm not seeing because I've dropped you guys down below my field of view so I can see my notes, just come on back on with an audible or something so I can see what's going on. Okay.
Sounds good. We've got your back.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, everybody. So hopefully you've got that first slide. So what we're going to talk about today is really the 10-step blueprint for success to ecological gardening. So as we progress through here, you'll hopefully, if I'm doing my job right, you'll learn a lot more about it. In the meantime, but if you have to duck out before we're finished, I just wanted you to know how you can get in touch with me or track me through the various channels that I have. And those are the 4 main ones right there. And if you want to screenshot that, I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. And then we'll get right into the meat of it and talk about what we'll cover today. But give you 5 more seconds there and we'll get moving here. All right. So what are we going to cover today? Well, obviously, the evolution of how we garden. Why is that important? Because how we got to where we are today is not necessarily a happy story, but it's an important one. And I want you to know the backstory. So where are we today and where do we need to get to? Because we're not there yet. And why the sense of urgency? Why now? And the steps that we can all take. So that beautiful picture right there, that's great. We can still have beauty and real year-round interest with our gardens, but we just need to redefine the aesthetic. It's part of the reason that we're having ecological gardening symposiums and summits and TED Talks and podcasts and books and videos. And it's because we're losing the fight to keep these habitats of wildlife alive, along with all the plant material that supports it. But they need each other, and we're losing them at an alarming rate, as you're about to find out. So creating and restoring meadows and prairies aren't the only thing we need to do, but it's a big part of the bigger picture that makes it imperative that we act while we still can. Fortunately, there are trends on lawns to meadows and adding more in native wildflowers and perennials to our landscapes. Everybody loves a meadow, at least when it's in full bloom. But the thing that a lot of people kind of forget about is there's a lot more to the meadow than what meets the eye. And after everything blooms, it's not so pretty, but it's still equally as important. Meadows are ecological lifeboats year round, but most people just don't see it that way. They see the beauty and then they see the not so pretty once the show is over for the season. But you and I know the show goes on all year and it just changes scenes. So how did we get here? I mean, why are we talking about ecological today? And if you're curious about this picture, this was taken at Mount Cuba Center in Delaware. It's a great, dedicated, open public garden for focusing on native plants. So we're going to talk a lot about native plants today. If you want a cool place to go see them in their natural habitat, that's the place to go. But here's an interesting part of a quote. I'm not going to show you the whole quote yet, but this part of it is important. And that is, in the past, we just asked one thing of our garden, and that is that they be pretty. But here's the thing that goes along with that. As gardeners, you probably know this, we create a lot of beautiful spaces, but in the process, we do a lot of not so pretty things to make them so. And that's caught up with us. And you may recall a time like I have, if you've been around the gardening world for more than 10 years, more like 20 years. I used to get this question all the time, and thankfully I don't get it nearly as much anymore. But a lot of times I would get asked from people, what can I spray on this plant? Or what can I spray on my garden to kill XYZ, whatever XYZ was? And, I would always ask, well, what is it you're trying to kill and why do you want to kill it? And they would never know what it was that they saw some damage on their garden somewhere and they just wanted to blanket the whole thing. They wanted to napalm the whole garden just to kill whatever it was, even though only 1% of all insects in the world are considered pests that do damage to plants, which means the other 99% are either benign or beneficial. So why would you want to do that when most of what's in your garden, almost all of it, is good or at least neutral at, worst case? So anyway, that's what we've been dealing with. But we've made some changes, and that's a good thing. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. But we started talking about organic gardening, thankfully, right after World War II, when the use of the synthetic chemicals for nitrogen and the other things that went into bomb making. Well, now that World War II was over, they wanted to repurpose those chemicals for other things. And fortunately, at that same time, J.I. Rodale, who's the founder of the Rodale Institute, was around, and he wanted to really try to lift up the concept of organic gardening when others were really trying to push synthetic chemicals. And that would be nice that we could do that. And we can. But we started looking to the soil with organic gardening to build soil health as the answer, not chemicals, but we were starting to focus on feeding the soil so the soil could feed the plants, not with a junk food diet of synthetic chemicals, but with organic material that did that. And the same for pesticides and fungicides and herbicides. So what we could be doing that reduced or eliminated the use of powerful synthetic chemicals and had fewer uninterrupted consequences was the focus on the soil and organic gardening. And then in the 50s came a concept called IPM, or integrated pest management. So if you've been around a while or you're a master gardener, surely you know the IPM process. And although it's been around since the 50s, it's the best roadmap for farmers because that's who IPM was originally created for, integrated pest management. But home gardeners have now, and because of that, have had a way to ease into methods of management for dealing with pests of all types. And even to this day, it's still the best known and widely most practiced form of pest management for those trying to lighten their ecological footprint just a little bit. So IPM is still around and it's still very effective, but we're going to move on from that with ecological gardening. But then came sustainable gardening. And most of you are probably at least have been around long enough to remember when the word sustainable got used a lot and it was applied to everything. But gardening had a place for the application of using the term sustainable too. And so it was kind of a step or in complement with IPM. And now we're talking about integrated resource management. And examples would be conservation of water, reduction of the use of plastic, and using compost versus other manufactured soils. And now a big push is the reduction of the use of peat moss. And there's reasons for that that I won't have much time to get into today, but that's one of the newest reasons why it applies. But how to garden in a way that reduces the use of vital resources and cuts down on excessive waste. That's kind of the bottom line. And again, less water, less runoff, less chemicals, less plastic packaging, etc. Now, one of the most recent terms that has come to be is the term regenerative gardening, agriculture, farming, also known as no-till, but you could substitute any of those words for gardening, but put regenerative, the verb in front of that, and that means something. But there's a lot of overlap with organic gardening, but where regenerative comes into play and adds a little actually a significant layer to that, is that we're increasing the biology in the field and building the soils, and a real focus on that, along with carbon sequestration. And that's a big part of it. And that actually directs exactly to why we're trying to reduce the use of peat, is keeping the carbon in the peat bogs because it's a huge storer of carbon. But ultimately, what regenerative seeks is to reverse negative impacts of climate change. That's its ultimate goal. And examples would be cover cropping and no-till, and how we can rein that in an agricultural practice. And now we've finally gotten to the point of a term that's becoming more popular by the day, thank goodness, and that is ecological gardening. And this is where gardening is heading, and I'm thankful for that, and how we're gardening for more than just ourselves. You heard me talk about that saying a minute ago, how we just asked our gardens that they be pretty for us, but now we realize we have to garden for more than just the beauty for us. But we're working with nature, not against it, to achieve a beautiful, sustainable garden. That's number one. But like with organic gardening, we want to discourage the use of chemicals by finding ways to boost the health of the soil and the plants. But it's so much more than that. But this is where gardening is heading, and expands on how we garden for more than just ourselves. The second paragraph of this saying right here is what I didn't read to you when I read the first part. So again, I'm going to read it all, and just to wrap it all up here. In the past, we just asked one thing of our gardens, that they be pretty, but now they have to support life and sequester carbon and feed pollinators and manage water. And thanks to our good friend, Dr. Doug Tallamy, professor of entomology at the University of Delaware and co-founder of Homegrown National Parks. And if you don't know who Doug Tallamy is, you will soon, but he is kind of our icon today and our best ambassador for ecological gardening and so much more. But he has a lot of great things to say about it. So I'm going to credit him a few times through this presentation because he said some amazing things. But as ecological gardening, the term was coming out over the past few years, there really, to my knowledge, or at least last time I checked, wasn't an established definition of what it meant. So I sort of gave some thought to that, and I came up with some pretty long definitions. But for the benefit of brevity, I wanted to create one that was pretty succinct and kind of summarize what it is in a nutshell. And that is, in my words, ecological gardening is the practice of creating and promoting healthy, biodiverse ecosystems in a way that benefits not only us, but moreover, all other life. And that's really the key, is now we're focusing on not only the beauty, but ecosystems, ecological systems, because it's a supported system and it's all interdependent. And we need to give credence and attention to that as we're going about what we do, because it's now more important than ever. And you'll see some specifics about that, which is to ask the question, so much to do, why now? What's been going on that makes it incumbent upon us to think beyond gardening just for ourselves, but instead gardening in a way that enhances the surrounding environment for the benefit of all life? We can still have beauty and year-round interest, but we may need to just refine the aesthetic. I mentioned that before. But again, back to Doug Tallamy, this is what he's saying and why now is so important. We are at a critical point of losing so many species from local ecosystems that their ability to produce oxygen and clean water and flood control and pollination and pest control and carbon storage, etc., that is, the ecosystem services that sustain us, will become seriously compromised. Okay, so some of you will be old enough to recognize this picture and imagine that's your dashboard going down a road trip, going down. And for me, it was always driving up the Florida Turnpike from Miami to the Smoky Mountains for our annual summer week-long vacation. And Dad would be driving, and the family of 6 would all be in the car. And every hour, I guess, he'd pull over and he'd get his squeegee out for the gas station and clean the windshield, because it got to the point that the love bugs and the June bugs and all those other insects were so blanketing the windshield that you couldn't really see. And that was the case with everybody. And many of you will recall this time. But just if you have, think about the last time you saw a windshield that was so blanketed by insects that you had to pull over and clean it off. I can't even tell you the last time, and other than when I was a kid and we were driving, up the road. So things have changed, and we're going to talk about that. Here's an example of a scene that, depending on where you live, you may still see many clusters of monarch butterflies in mass. But for me here in Atlanta, Georgia, I've lived on my farm here for 15 years. And I am here to tell you that on a woodland, ecological, organic farm where I've been gardening the entire time without chemicals on 5 acres, I have probably seen no more than 10 monarch butterflies collectively over the course of 15 years. And so usually it's one at a time, and it's not every year, obviously, if I've been here 15 years and I've only seen 10, and that's a scary, scary sign. But here's the thing, year to year, I really wasn't noticing that I wasn't seeing as many monarchs. And the reason for that is a saying that I love from David Wagner, entomologist at the University of Connecticut. He said this, and it's very powerful, and it speaks very succinctly to what we're dealing with today. We notice the losses when all of a sudden it occurs to us like, hey, I haven't seen a monarch in 5 years, or whatever that aha is for you. I haven't seen that windshield covered with insects for 20 years. But here's the thing. We notice the losses when we think back to the last time we saw something we haven't seen for a while, but we don't notice the diminishments along the way. We don't notice those gradual declines year to year to year, but they're happening way more than we realize. And we need to take stock of that. But man, it's out there. So the number of monarchs to be, to bring it home here is, over the overwintering period of 2023 to 2024, the percentage in Mexico of those overwintering monarchs precipitously dropped to the second lowest level in recorded history. Only in the winter of 2013 and 2014 did they have fewer butterflies. And scientists said the decline appeared to be driven by hot, dry conditions, a la climate change, in the US and Canada that reduced food supply of milkweed and the available of nectar from many kinds of flowers, 59% less than the previous year. And I'm going to add to that climate change and pesticide use also, because those are big contributors. And then habitat loss. Those are the big three. And that definitely is leaving its mark. So widespread use of pesticides, there is no doubt anymore. We know that pesticides are a major contributor to what's happening across the world and why we're seeing so much decline of so many species of wildlife and why a lot of this is happening. Why widespread pesticide use is a big part of that. And as home gardeners, it's not just the horticultural industry or the farming industry that's really wreaking havoc. The horticultural industry marketing to home gardeners who are selling plants to us, they play a role in it too. And then what we do to manage insect pests at home is also devastating, because some of what is going into those plants is impacting what happens to our insects that are on them. So I want to just delve into one class of insecticides that are widely used. And when we buy plants at the nursery, oftentimes flowering plants especially, these plants have been treated with a class of insecticide called neonicotinoids. It's widely used in agriculture, the horticulture industry, and home gardens. And they're known for their systemic nature, meaning they draw up the chemical through the roots and through the plant tissue, and they are absorbed by the plants and distributed throughout their tissue, including the pollen and the nectar, making them toxic to a range of insects, as you can imagine. But neonicotinoids have raised significant environmental concerns due to their potential impact of pollinators like bees, beneficial insects, aquatic invertebrates, and even birds. Pretty scary. I'm going to give you a little more detail here regarding neonicotinoids. And I know there's a lot of information here, but this is just something that I wanted you to try to just get your head around this as I go through it. But systemic insecticides are absorbed by plants and move through their tissue, reaching all parts of the plants. I mentioned that. They're most commonly used insecticides globally, and they're found in various products like seed treatments, soil drenches, and even flea collars. They primarily target insects with the central nervous system, causing paralysis and death. They can also harm non-targeted insects because they're non-selective. So bees are impacted, as well as other pollinators and even aquatic invertebrates. They can persist in the environment, contaminate soil, water, and sediment. And the concerns are that the impact of neonicotinoids on pollinator health, ecosystem health, and potentially human health with chronic exposure. So this is bad stuff. And then we've got the widespread dispersal of, insecticides and pesticides all over our household environments through the companies that we hire oftentimes. And what they're spraying is not selective. That spray is not picking out just the bad insects and letting everybody else survive. That's called broad spectrum, non-selective. So anything it comes in contact with is dying. And there's drift, so your neighbors get it. More examples, 45% of arthropods in the last 35 years have declined. We've lost 45%. About 84% of all known species of animals are member of this phylum. It's the largest in the animal kingdom, and arthropods are represented in every habitat of the earth. So what are arthropods, or what are examples of arthropods? Well, that includes lobsters, crabs, spiders, mites, insects, centipedes, and millipedes. And about 1 million arthropod species have been described, of which most are insects. But this distinguishing feature of all arthropods is the presence of an exterior skeleton, which we know is an exoskeleton. But pretty scary stuff that there's that many, and we've had a 45% loss of all of the arthropods in the last 35 years. Another sobering statistic, 3 billion songbirds have vanished from North America in the last 50 years. 2/3 of the Earth's wildlife is gone. Most of the recorded extinctions were caused by mankind, no surprise, either by excessive hunting or by the loss of their habitat through farming, forestry, and tourism. And all of those factors led to the changing of their environment that they were not able to adapt to. And again, habitat loss and pesticide use, of course. But then there is the relentless habitat loss. And we can, all we can really control and protect, unfortunately, at least firsthand, is the ground under our feet that we call home, by creating healthy, biodiverse habitats and ecosystems. And collectively, that can make a difference. And Doug Tallamy does a good job of helping us understand how that works with examples, but really, it'll add up. So let's talk about that system that was created in the 50s that is still a good roadmap today. And it's called integrated pest management. If you're a master gardener, you know these steps, but this is going to be a refresher, and it's going to be good information for those of you where this is new. But there are 5 basic steps to it, and I want to walk you through those briefly with some examples. So the first step is to confirm the suspect insect is a pest. Remember, I used to get questions all the time about people just wanting to spray their garden because they wanted to kill whatever it was that was eating something. And so we need to confirm, first of all, what is that insect and what can we use to control it most effectively if we're going to apply anything at all. But you can't just call a insect guilty just because it looks scary. For example, my question to you, I can't see the chat right now, so if I could, I would ask you, and maybe you want to play this anyway, looking at these 2 insects, one is a beneficial and one is not so good. So I would ask you, what is the one on the left and what is the one on the right? And I'll give you 5 seconds to answer that while I take a sip of tea. And now I'm going to tell you. The one on the left is a lady beetle larva. So our beloved ladybugs, as cute as they are, those round, oval, black and red polka dotted insects, which are great at killing aphids. Well, guess what's greater than that? The larva, the one on the left. Before it becomes the adult, it doesn't look anything like it. So if you see this, that is your best friend in the garden. And so please leave it alone because they're doing a lot of good beneficial things. But the one on the right is the squash vine borer moth. So if you've ever grown squash or cucurbits, you are familiar with this little booger because they wreak havoc. And this is the male. This is the female flying around. It's a daytime moth. And so it's easy to spot, very distinctive. But when you see this, this is your precursor to the fact that she's looking for a place to lay some eggs. So you need to have a heads up here, because if you don't get proactive with this one, you're going to be very disappointed with your squash harvest because you're not going to have a harvest. It's going to take it out before that happens. So one more example, the one on the left versus the one on the right. There's a good one here and there's a not so good one here. 5 more seconds and you tell me what it is in the chat. The one on the left is a ladybug and the one on the right is a bean beetle. They're cousins, but the one on the right is if you grow bean plants, they're going to show up. And they reproduce very quickly, and they love to eat your leaves, and they take no prisoners. So you want to be out on the lookout for that. But the one on the left, best friend. That's the adult phase of the larva that I just showed you. Now, step number 2 in the IPM process is to monitor for pest activity. So there's some aphids taking over parts of that plant. And if you are a little queasy, you might want to proactively do something right then and there. Or you may say, hey, those aphids really haven't been a problem in the past. I'm going to let Mother Nature come along. I'm going to let those ladybugs come along. And the lacewings and some other ones, they'll pick them off. And more often than not, they do. And nothing needs to be done. But, that's your prerogative. But you need to monitor the pest activity so that you can determine your action of threshold. So when is it that your plants get to that point where you feel you need to intervene? When do you need to start either picking them off or tapping them into a cup of soapy water or applying a benign-ish form of insecticide if possible? But here's what I want you to know about leaf damage with insects. Plants can handle about 35% damage to their foliage before they even start to be affected. So if you can exercise some tolerance, Mother Nature has some really great tools that she's going to bring in to take out most of those problems. But we have to be patient with that. But if we're not, what I would do in this case is I'd go out early in the morning when they're still inactive, before they really wake up and become active, with a cup of soapy water, and I would tap the leaf and they would drop right in. And that would be the end of it. And in this case, these are potato leaves. So if you're in an average home garden, you're going to have maybe grow some potatoes, but you're not going to have so many that this wouldn't be unmanageable. For me, I grow about 16 big grow bags of potatoes. And so I can walk down that row in a matter of 5 minutes and take out every potato beetle there is without any pesticide or insecticide, just knocking them into some soapy water. All right. So then you need to explore, when you decide that you want to try doing some a little more aggressive controls, you need to explore your management options, starting with the least impactful. So let's talk about snails and slugs. They're a problem around much of the country. And for those of you in the Pacific Northwest, my sympathies go out to you because I know you struggle with this all the time. And you all probably already know this trick, but like a lot of us, snails and slugs love beer. They actually love the yeast in the beer, so they're very attracted to it. But if you were to take a bowl and make it level with the soil where you're seeing the pest and snail activity, and fill the bowl almost to the rim with beer, not quite to the top, but almost. You do that in the evening. In the morning, when you come out, you will have a bowl full of dead, drunk snails and slugs. But it works, and it's very benign to other insects and other critters in the garden because they're not interested in that like the snails and slugs. So this is what I'm talking about with trying to focus in on, if you're actually going to do anything, what is it that you can do if it exists that won't be so broad impactful, trying to be as targeted as possible. But one of the best things you can do before you even apply to anything is inspect your plants. Be proactive. Get out there and check for damage like the little caterpillars and pick them off. Just hand inspect. Take a dedicated few minutes or 20 minutes in the morning or whatever. Morning's the best time because you'll find them more often then. And be sure to look under the leaves. Or maybe it is to put some floating row cover or insect netting over your plants after you've planted them, so you can prevent the flying moths that will lay the eggs on the leaves. And then that's where the caterpillars come from and hatch to do the damage. Or maybe it's the thing on the right there. That's diatomaceous earth, which is fossilized diatoms, basically glass-like little microscopic skeletons of fossils, but they're very sharp. And when snails and slugs or other soft-bodied pests cross over that, the tissue is cut and it basically desiccates them to the point that they dry out to death. But it only impacts a certain class of critters, and it's fairly benign, all things considered. It's not broad spectrum. It's not going to really harm most of your beneficials. But again, a reminder to look under the leaves because insects are not stupid. They're the target of birds and other predators. So they're hiding too. So the way that you're going to find them in the morning or anytime you see damage to your leaves, don't just do a top scan. Always, always, always lift the leaf up to look underneath. And that's where you're going to find 99% of the offenders is under the leaves. So what I propose is an IPM update. So that was the 5 steps to the integrated pest management created in the 50s and never really updated. But now that we know, other than just wanting our gardens to be pretty, we know that we have a bigger job to do than that. So that's why we need to expand on this term for IPM and add a few things. So what I want to see us do is get away from IPM and go to something with a few more letters. And that would be IPM, DWSMCWNILBHM. So that stands for pest, disease, and weeds, which is what IPM stands for. But then we need to add soil, mulch, environmental footprint. We need to lighten that. We need to deal with chemicals, water, native plants, invasives, lawns, biodiversity, and a holistic approach to the whole thing. So don't let all of those words intimidate you, because rather than have to deal with all of those letters as we're trying to reference that, we can also reference it as ecological gardening, which is what we're talking about, what we've been talking about, what I'm going to show you with the 10-step blueprint right now. But that's just a view from part of my garden, and that is a lot of native perennials in there mixed in with my vegetable garden, which is amazing because it attracts so many beneficial insects. I just love it. All right. So the 10 practices of ecological gardening. So let's start with one that probably all of us could guess, and that is promoting healthy soil. The solution to 95% of our challenges is really in the soil. Healthy soil equals healthy plants equals healthy people. But there's so much beneficial bacteria and organisms, microbes, biological activity taking place in the soil that it's converting a lot of that organic material, the nutrients that are there that are not yet converted, but thanks to all that biology in the soil, it is able to convert it into organic nutrients that the roots can absorb and feed our plants as it's needed, not when we decide that it's needed. So by simply and it is really a simple focus of building soil health with organic matter and compost and continuing to update that once or twice a year and avoiding the use of any synthetic chemicals or harsh inputs, we can really effectively grow out a very, very healthy garden. But by promoting the healthy soil, we continue to add organic material like compost. You don't promote healthy soil by continuing to poison it with synthetic chemicals. And that's not feeding the soil, but it's making your plants lazy and dependent on a junk food diet when you do that. And you do not want to do that. You want them to be on a really healthy diet of organic matter. Number two is increase the use of living and natural mulches. So mulch gives you more bang for the buck than anything else that I can think of in the garden other than compost. They're tough competitors, but mulch really starts out on the surface, and compost is building into your soil, but ultimately the two work together beautifully. So I would put mulch as number two for improving your garden. And once it's degraded, it becomes essentially compost anyway. So here's a picture of my garden in its newer days when the beds were fresh and I didn't have a greenhouse. But anyway, you see the mulch in the pathways there. So that's just ground up hardwood natural mulch that I got from the wholesale plant nursery up the road for $23 a yard. And I probably use 4 yards to fill that space twice a year, maybe. And then the beds, they're mulch too. And mulch is so important for so many reasons. Not only is it beautiful, but for me, that's really the least important thing. I like that it is, but more important than that is the other things that mulch does. And this isn't even an entire list, but I'm going to talk to each of these briefly. It protects the soil surface. Basically, it's a cushion so that your soil does not become completely impervious through the baking sun. And by acting as a cushion, when raindrops are hitting mulch before it hits the soil, it has a chance to soak into the soil so the soil can absorb it rather than the water running off. Think of it as a drip coffee maker. The water is going into that filter and then it's just kind of seeping through. Well, that's what mulch does when it's on the surface of the soil to protect the soil and prevent the runoff. So it improves water infiltration. That's number two. It reduces soil compaction. I bet you didn't know this, or at least most of you. Water striking the soil has been described as the equivalent of a hammer hitting a nail head. Over time, the raindrops pounding on exposed soil just exacerbates compaction over time. So it's a longer process, but it really does have that impact over time. Mulch reduces soil-borne diseases from getting onto your plants. So as that protective layer, as it's raining or as you're overhead irrigating and that water is splashing down onto the surface, if it's hitting the mulch, it's not hitting the soil, because if it were to hit the soil, there's a lot of pathogens that live in the soil that can basically be launched onto your leaves when those drops of water hit the soil and the soil particles bounce back up with the water droplets. They can take that pathogen with them, and that could be the start of infecting your plants. So it can reduce soil-borne diseases. It suppresses weed germination. That's the number one reason why that mulch is in that pathway that you saw. When mulch is covering this exposed surface, it precludes sunlight from hitting those seeds that are just laying in wait for sunlight. And they're not going to germinate until they get the sunlight. And as long as I cover it, they don't sprout. Now, eventually, if that mulch gets pushed aside, those are opportunistic weeds, every one of them, and they're going to germinate. But the more that we can cover that exposed soil, the better off we'll be with treating our weeds. And I can tell you, it makes a huge difference when you cover the exposed soil. So don't ever leave soil exposed. And that you could do it with living mulch too. I showed that picture of the split screen, and that top section was just a ground cover, which is a great way to cut down on the weeds because it shades the entire surface off, and it also outcompetes weeds that would want to germinate there. Whereas mulch doesn't necessarily outcompete, a living mulch will. It retains moisture. It keeps the soil cooler. It reduces the evaporative effect because the sun can't really beat down on the soil surface. So it helps keep the soil cooler by improving the temperature or moderating the temperature, and thereby cutting down on the evaporation rate. It improves soil health. I touched on that briefly by the fact that as that mulch breaks down, that in my hand there, in 2 years untouched, that would be unrecognizable as soil. And in a year, it would be semi-composted and beautiful to work with anywhere. And it reduces runoff, and it keeps the nasty stuff that's moving downhill, even if it's coming from your neighbor. Every water always seeks its lowest point. So if you can do things in your yard to prevent that water from continuing to flow to an aquifer or a water basin or a creek or a watershed somewhere, all the better, and the better off we'll be for our aquatic creatures too, and the water pollution. And I said it's aesthetically pleasing. I touched on that, but it's the least important. Number 3, and these are going to pick up the pace, by the way. This is going to go pretty fast here as we get closer to the 10. It's important that we maintain our garden and surroundings with a lighter footprint. And there are several things that we can do for that. And one of them is to not be so tidy. And years ago, when we were talking horticulture and studying horticulture, it was impressed upon us that fall was the time, an important time for us to put the garden to bed. And what that meant was clean up the garden, get all the plant debris out of the way, rake the leaves up, cut back all the perennials, and reduce the risk of any diseases or overwintering problems from living out to infect our gardens in spring. Well, now we know that that's a bunch of bunk. There's a little truth to that, but it's so small that it's not even worth considering. We know now that there's things that we should be doing that doesn't require any cleaning up, like leaving the seed heads on our perennials, because that's a vital food source for insects and for birds. It's a major energy source over winter. And many of those native perennials and non-native perennials have hollow stems. And those hollow stems are often used by solitary bees. They bore into the sides, they go in, they lay their eggs, and that's where the eggs and the larva overwinters. And then in the springtime, they emerge from those hollow stems. But if we're playing cleanup in the fall, we're cutting all that back, and we deny them an opportunity to have a place to overwinter. So don't be so tidy with your stems and your flowers in your garden. And surely you're aware the leaves, that's a super important one. And again, Doug Tallamy really brought that to light. But we now know how important it is to leave the leaves, because so many overwintering insects and caterpillars and ladybugs and frogs and turtles and amphibious creatures and sky's the limit are overwintering in the leaves. And forever, we've always wanted to clean them up. We looked at them as a nuisance, and we needed to get them away. And I have to admit, I mean, I am still a huge fan of shredded composted leaf mulch as a soil amendment for my plant propagation and my seed starting mix, and for my garden beds. Where you look at my beds, I love shredded leaf mulch, but I would either mow over my leaves and I'd collect them like that, and they would already be shredded. But when my mower broke down and I needed more than I had on my property, years ago, I started promoting to the Nextdoor app and the Facebook app for my local community. And I'd post on weekends in November, and I'd say, hey, if anybody has bagged leaves, let me know and I'll come pick them up for you for free. Because the problem is around here, maybe where you live, HOAs especially require that the leaves get cleaned up in the fall and they get bagged to be picked up by the trash service. But the sad part about that is there's a lot of sad parts, but mainly the trash service is picking those up and they're taking them to the landfill. They're not even taking them to a recycling or composting facility, which is where they should be going, so that they can rot out in the open while the overwintering insects in there have a chance to get out. And that then becomes compost a few years down the road. And then they should make that available to the community for free. And that's full cycle. But unfortunately, the majority of what happens to these bags goes to the landfill. So I'm trying to intercept as many as I can. And over the course of 3 weekends, I would collect about 400 bags of these, and I would pile them up in my property. And then when I had some energy about later in November, I'd start shredding them up with my leaf shredder. And then they would go into a big corral, and they would live out from November to May. And then in May, I would harvest from there. And you can see the difference between fresh leaves on the right and shredded semi-composted leaves on the left. And that's about a 5-month breakdown period. And that is gold right there. But I tell you that because I don't want you to do it because we need to leave those leaves. Now, if you need to collect a few of these, and I've run these by a few people that I trust, and David Mizejewski with the Wildlife Federation, the naturalist with them, and I was confessing my sins there, and I was really lamenting how guilty I was feeling. He said, look, if you're just doing a little bit, don't feel bad about it. Just do what you need to, and there's plenty otherwise. But now I don't even do that because I found another source, so I don't have to shred my own leaves. But anyway, I am just freeing the leaves at this point. So I still collect the leaves, but I go around my native plant beds and I empty the bag. So I free the leaves, all 400 of them, and they build up in my beds and they break down naturally. And hopefully all the overwintering insects do too. Okay. So then we want to consider the equipment that we're using. There's plenty of opportunities to practice ecological gardening without putting carbon into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide through emissions. And you know about electric rechargeable equipment now. And I'm here to tell you that pretty much everything I have is battery operated whenever possible. And it's a real joy. And I'll never go back to gas. It's a big pain. It's expensive to maintain. And this is a joy to use. Starts with a pull of a trigger. It's quiet. There's no emission. And I hope that all of you will get to this point as soon as you can if you haven't already, because it makes a big difference with ecological gardening. Now, number 4 is eliminate the use of chemicals. Now, you already heard me talk about that, but by being proactive in your garden, getting out to your garden as often as you can, looking under the leaves and spotting pests as you can. And if you want to remove them, do so. But if not, let them be, and Mother Nature will take care of it. But something else that's really important to know is that the unintended consequences of when we reach for an insecticide and we spray our plants, we're doing more than just potentially killing the target insect. Of course, you already know that we're killing many, many more insects that were just there doing good things for our garden, but there's unintended consequences with birds too. And I interviewed Dr. Stephen Kress with the Audubon Society for one of my podcast episodes years ago. And I asked him the question, not knowing there would even be an answer, but I said, hey, Dr. Kress, do you guys have any stats on how many backyard songbirds are killed from secondary use of insecticides? Because we know how insects are their primary food source. Does that have any effect on how they survive or not? He says, as a matter of fact, it's bad. He said, I'm going to give you a number and you could add another digit to this. But he said about 7 million is what we estimate a year of backyard songbirds die from secondary use of just eating insects that died from insecticides. But by adding another 0, that makes it 70 million. And he said you wouldn't be wrong there. So it's very scary to think about that, but it's very common. And we just don't need to be using insecticides. And there's a thing called greenwashing. The term is applied in a lot of ways, but with the pesticide industry, the people that the mow and blow, I mean, the Mosquito Joe people or whatever the companies are, and that's not intended to pinpoint them. It's just, you know what I'm talking about. When these companies say they've got natural or eco-friendly ways to spray for mosquitoes and they come to your yard and they fog it or they spray everything, they don't tell you what's in there by design. But even if they want to tell you it's pyrethrin or pyrethroid, which is a synthetic, more potent version of pyrethrin, which pyrethrin is a natural enzyme from the chrysanthemum daisy. So it is organic, but it's very deadly. It's non-selective. It'll kill anything it comes in contact with. But what they do is they supercharge it, put it into their foggers or their spray packs, and they go around and fog out your yard. And then that drift goes off into your neighbors and it just wipes out everything. So any beekeepers or any native plant people who are trying to build a biodiverse environment are getting wiped out every time the mosquito spray guy, fog guy shows up. And so that's an example of greenwashing. They don't tell you the parts that you really need to know. So I would encourage you to ask them, but I can tell you they don't have anything that's going to work that's not safe or that is safe. Okay. Mosquito buckets. This was a big thing in the past few years and it works. If you want to kill the mosquitoes flying around your yard, you can make a mosquito bucket. I don't have time to tell you how to make it here, but on my YouTube channel, which you saw that, Joe Gardner TV, I have a video on how to do it. It's very effective and you only need one for an average size backyard, but it works for about 30 days and it's so many people can testify. I can too. It's a game changer. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. Number 5, and then we're really going to whip through here on the last ones, is that I want you to conserve and provide water. So conserving water, I think you have a good sense on making sure that you save water for a rainy day, because there will come a time where wherever you live, there will be a drought and you'll wish you had set aside some rainwater harvesting. But the other thing, if you do it through drip irrigation by just micromanaging how you water your plants by giving just what they need to just where they need it, or soaker hoses that emits water through the entire length of a porous tube on an automatic timer, which is the best of both worlds. But you also need to make sure that you have sources of water for the wildlife. And this is a small bird feeder water, a bird bath outside my office window. And this was one day I caught these blue jays just yakking it up and holding court on this little water bird bath. And it was a hoot, but it just reminded me how important it is. No matter the size, we need to have water at all times. And that's not just for the birds, but it's for the frogs. It's for the bees. On a hot summer day, if you have a shallow basin filled with water, they will surround the edge of your water collection area because they are hot and they are thirsty and they are starving for water, and they don't have the energy to fly looking for water. And we can't just assume that it's out there, especially in drought conditions, especially we need to supplement that. So I hope you get the message there, and we need it for all kinds of wildlife. And then number 6, I want you to please focus on growing more native plants, because those are the ones that have co-evolved with all the wildlife that depends on plant-specific varieties and species, such as the Joe Pye weed right here. So many insects just use that as its vital food source in the fall. And then we know that milkweed is critical in the summertime. As the monarchs are flying through, they lay their eggs on the leaves of the milkweed because the caterpillars, that is their sole food source. That is all they eat. And if we don't have that out there for them all over the country as they're migrating away from Mexico and back to Mexico at the end of the season, we need to understand what those food sources are, not just in the summertime, but all through the year. And it's going to be native plants, the ones that the insects have co-evolved on. And I'm talking a little bit fast because I know I just have a few minutes left to finish this up. But then removing invasives. We talk a lot about habitat loss and urban sprawl and deforestation as major reasons why we're using so much wildlife, but it's the non-native invasive plants that are every bit as much of the problem. And they are more aggressive, and they displace native plants, which take away the food and the resources that the wildlife depends on and that they co-evolve with. And they need those native plants. And the more invasive plants that are out there, it just gets worse and they take over. So we need to do everything we can to remove the aggressive non-native invasives. What makes a plant invasive? They're adaptable. I need to go through this pretty fast, but I'm going to give you the headlines here. They're adaptable. They're fast growing and fast spreading. They can reproduce in multiple ways. They're prolific seeders, and their seeds are highly viable. They're quick to fill open spaces, and usually they're the first plants to fill a void in an open space. Once established, non-native invasive plants can prevent or inhibit the return of native plants. So remove invasives. They're responsible for 60% of worldwide extinction among other plants. They impose a huge bill every year on society. Each year, North America is losing about 1.5 million acres to native vegetation due to invasive species. And they can be likened to a slow explosive that poses significant risk to ecosystem stability and biodiversity.
Joe, this
Yes.
is Paul here. Just wanted to let you know, go ahead and take your time. I think this is really important. So go
Okay.
ahead and just make sure that they catch the good points here. I don't want you to feel stressed about trying to wrap it up in like 1 minute.
That's awesome. Thank you, because these are important parts. So, and anyway, we're almost done. But I mean, really, this is the area where we really need to focus as ecological gardeners, doing all that we can to find out what is native in our area. Join the Native Plant Society in your state, or go to their meetings or their educational events, their workshops, their plant rescues. They're amazing. I'm active with my Georgia Native Plant Society, and I can't say enough good things about them and how much I've learned in the time that I've been involved with them and the work that they do. And it's contagious, and you feel good about it, and you know that you're doing important things for your property and for the environment. And that is one of the keystone activities of ecological gardening, is planting more natives and being proactive with it, removing the invasives. This is down the street from my house. I took this picture a couple months ago. That is kudzu. That's the vine that took over the South. It was introduced as an fast-growing ornamental at the Philadelphia Flower Show in the late 1800s, and we can see where that went. Okay, so number 8, reduce your lawn. You know, Doug Tallamy says, hey, cut your lawn in half. And if everybody in the country did that, we would make a huge difference. Lawns are low-hanging fruit. There are more than 40 million acres nationwide, and each American landowner if they covered half of their property to native plant communities, they would cover more than 20 million acres of what is now ecological wasteland. What you could do there, that was my property when I moved in. I put some grass seed in, I made native plant beds, but that was all at one time turf. And so I have 5 acres, and really all the grass I have at this part, other than some pasture for my horses, is this part. And it's gotten thinner since this picture was taken. So there's not much grass left, but it's just a thin river, and the rest are native plant beds. Here's a meadow that you can just mow through, one simple mowing path or a few. That's beautiful. And all the flowers in bloom for all the wildlife and the ecological activity that will live in the uncut area. That's something you could do. And that's not even grass right there. That's mondo grass, which is not considered turf, but it looks like turf. It doesn't have to be mowed. It doesn't need any insecticide, herbicide, or pesticide. Talking about low maintenance. They cut it once a year to trim the tops, and that is it. So if you want to look up that's dwarf mondo grass, and that's in Atlanta, Georgia. Or you can do a foodscape. You can plant ornamental edibles, and nobody will even know, so you won't get in trouble with your HOA. It'll look beautiful, and you can go out there and pick your dinner, and I highly recommend that. And then, of course, number 9 is you've got to have biodiversity, because without it, you have a monoculture. And biodiversity is so important because that's what attracts the greatest amount of diversity with insects and other wildlife. And that's the system that we're trying to do with ecological gardening. This is full circle where we're getting to that part of having a beautiful garden, as you see, but also having one that is attracting beneficial insects, predatory insects, pollinators, other wildlife, that creates that ecosystem that sustains all of this together. And this is more than pretty. This is functional, and it's serving not only us, but for the wildlife and everything living in it. And then think beyond the garden. You know, we got to think holistically about reducing climate change and our consumption and disposal. And the companies that you support, think about what they do and how they act. Are they good stewards? Landfills are the largest contributor to they're large contributors to man-made methane gas, the much more potent than carbon dioxide. And 65% of landfills don't need to be there because they can be composted or recycled. And 40% of the 65%, here's the best news, can be composted, which is the single best ingredient you can put into your garden soil to make it better. And then the other is food waste, and 25% of that can be recycled. So that is it. So we made it with 1 minute to spare, not counting Q&A time. And again, just a last look at some ways to contact me, and hopefully you'll participate and check out the YouTube channel, and I'd love to converse with you. And if you have any feedback, this would be a great way through the Instagram channel at Joe Gardener to let me know if you have any other questions. If we don't have time for your question today, you can hit me there, and I promise you I'll get back to you. And the Online Gardening Academy that I established right there, that last link will take you to the courses that are available. Currently, Master Seed Starting is open for a few more hours. But anyway, those are the links, and I'm going to stop talking and turn it back to Paul and see if we have a few minutes for questions. I don't know, but I'm through, and I'm turning it back over to you guys.
All right, Joe.
Thank you. That was really good.
Yeah, people were just really digging it throughout the presentation. I'm glad you were able to take a little extra time to spell out those last ones there. We're going to leave your slide up for a little bit so people can connect with you there. And if you have, just judging from the reaction in the chat, I think people are willing to stick around. If you have a little bit of extra time.
I do. I'd love to.
Okay, let's do it. Let's get to some questions, because there are a good number of really good questions in here. One of the first ones that I'll just bring up right here, because I think multiple people were asking about it, is about ticks. And they're like, unmowed grass invites ticks, and what do we do about ticks? What are your thoughts on ticks?
From what I understand is that, and I admit I have to do a better job of getting up on speed on ticks. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe if you've got sort of a barrier, like a mounded barrier that separates the a woodland area where maybe the ticks are likely to first start out, from the deer or whatever. They're in that unkempt area. And then you kind of have a mound, and then you have your lawn area. I think that it's that separated buffer because of the change in the texture or the mound. That goes a long way to really cutting down on the activity or eliminating. I'm kind of leery to say just eliminating, but really reducing the tick activity that comes onto the lawn and beyond. Now, I know a lot of things, but that's an area that I admit that I should know more about. But that's about all I can tell you with only not 100% certainty. And I'm sorry about that to lead off with a question I don't feel really strong in answering, but I promise I'll do better. And I wish I could give you a better answer there.
Yeah. And I'll just say we did a path like that one time through our field. That path was really pretty, right? Going through the the unmowed grass prairie on either side.
Yeah.
And as long as that path is wide enough, we would walk up and down it and didn't really have tick issues.
And that was part of the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Dad, was there any questions that stuck out to you? I see one here about ladybugs. Actually, there's kind of two ladybugs here. Elena says, what can we do to attract ladybugs? Because I get aphids consistently every year, but not too many ladybugs come and eat them. We don't use pesticides, so it's like they're not actively destroying them, but what can they do to attract them? And maybe a follow-up to that, Tammy is asking about the difference between the Asian ones that look like ladybugs versus real ladybugs. Are they the same? Like, are they both beneficial, etc.?
They are both beneficial, but all over the country, I can't remember the number of varieties of ladybugs, but there are many across the U.S. The Asian lady beetles are definitely the most prolific, and they are all beneficial. But as far as attracting them, they're hungry little critters, and they are looking for a meal. And so if you're growing a flower or vegetable garden, chances are they're going to be there because they're not picky eaters. And so they're attracted to a lot of things. And because many aphids and other insects that ladybugs are interested in show up on the diversity that you have in your garden, which is another reason why we want to have diverse gardens. You plant it and they will come, and they, in this example, are the food sources for the ladybugs. But the ladybugs are coming for the food sources, and the food sources are coming for all the diversity in your garden. And it's a beautiful thing to see them show up. But they do. I've never outwardly tried to attract ladybugs, but they certainly show up. And there's really no need to buy them by the bag that are harvested in their dormant state from the Sierra Nevada mountains in the wintertime or the dormant period. And you bring those in, and they're not from here. They fly away after maybe they've eaten some, but then they disappear. And it's best to just try to focus on biodiversity in your garden, and you will get all the ladybugs you need.
Yeah. Awesome.
There's a number of questions about mulch.
Yeah.
What's the best kind of mulch?
The best kind of mulch is here's my definition of mulch that I like. It's natural, and over time it eventually breaks down to unrecognizable organic matter. So it would look soil-like in a period of 1 to 2 years. The only mulch I don't like is rubber mulch, but I don't even not like that if you have it in a playground or under a swing set or a pathway, maybe in a non-garden situation. So there may be an application for it. But as far as mulch goes, I love untreated natural hardwood mulch because there's no dye involved in it, even though the dyes are vegetable based. So they're not really an issue. But I like the naturalness of hardwood mulch because it will last for a good while. So if you're using it in a pathway, that's very helpful because you won't have to replace it as often. But that's what I use anytime I need a pathway setting. But arborist wood chips are free And if you live in a city where the website chipdrop.com serves your city, there are arborists that subscribe to that website that are looking for people like you and me that want free arborist wood chips. And we sign up and let Chip Drop know we want some. The arborist checks the website and finds out that you're in their neighborhood that day. So they're going to claim that spot, and they're going to be dumping a whole truckload of arborist wood chips on your safe area where you've designated for them to put them. And they will, assuming it's a safe place for them to get their truck and dump it. But that is a 10 to 20 yard load of free wood chips that you can then disperse in all my native plant beds. From that picture you saw with that river of grass going through it, those beds are covered every year with 1 or 2 toppings of native, arborist wood chips that are free. So my favorite is untreated, natural, and especially when it's free wood chips. But I also like shredded pine bark mulch. And the one thing I would be careful of it when you're buying like cedar mulch or a specialty mulch, I would see if you can find out where the mulch is sourced from, because sometimes there's some shady characters in the industry that are harvesting from protected areas or wetlands where they shouldn't be, or these species are endangered and they're still like cypress mulch. So heads up on that one, and just caveat emptor, just be careful about that. And I'll stop there. I could go on, but I'll stop.
That's great. Love it. All right, we're going to do a quick giveaway. We've got some more questions, but for those of you in the chat, we are going to be giving away, and we wanted to do something that really went along with the presentation here today. So we're going to give away a pollinator mix. This is a seed mix from Green Cover, and we're going to let you choose whether you want a warm season pollinator or a cool season pollinator. You can get a 1 pound bag or a 5 pound bag, and we're going to give it away. This can be as part of your ecological journey right here. So type in the chat. Let me just actually pull up our giveaway tool here and type in the chat bees, BEES. And that can just go along with like save the bees type scenario. All right.
So some suggestions on how to use that pollinator mix. If you have space in your garden, you can designate a bed
There you go.
for the pollinator mix and bring them to your garden. If you have some lawn that you can dedicate to pollinators,
do it.
Fix it for that.
Yeah. All right, this is a good question from Diana. What about Castile soap and neem oil?
Yeah. Castile soap is a good one for insecticidal soap, and neem oil from the neem tree is also a good one. So the oil is a little thicker, so it's going to coat. And usually that oil is applied towards insects that have a hard outer coat, a hard outer shell. And it'll basically suffocate them, so they won't be able to breathe. Castile soap is often used in insecticidal soap, and it is part soap, little drops of soap and some oil to help it stick, and water. And what that does is that desiccates, or that dries out whatever it is you're spraying the soap or that mixture on. And keep in mind, though, both of those are non-selective, so they're organic. Both of them I think Castile is just a natural soap product. And they're effective on the right insects, but they're also non-discriminatory. Again, broad spectrum, non-selective. Those are the two terms, meaning that there's no differentiation when they land on a beneficial or a insect pest, bona fide pest, if they're subjected to desiccation through it, and those are the soft-bodied insects, or even a hard-bodied insect like a ladybug in its younger stage. If Castile soap in an insecticidal soap mix landed on it, even though it's a beneficial, because it's soft-bodied, it's going to desiccate it and it will die too. So that's why, I try not to use anything. I understand the applications when they're necessary, but my first request for everybody is to try to not use anything and see how it goes. But I recognize sometimes the need to do something.
Yeah, that actually, I think, kind of leads into the next question here, which is from Jan. She says, how do we protect our plants from insects and caterpillars and yet leave enough birds, enough for the birds to feed their young, right? So it's kind of that, I feel like it
Yeah,
kind of
no.
what you just said.
What, so the caterpillars are probably only doing damage to specific plants. And so what you could do is remove them from, well, here's what you could do. A quick solution is like decoy plant, or maybe a sacrificial bed, where if their favorite plant is X, you plant a sacrificial bed over here. So you're relocating to the sacrificial bed. An example would be tomato hornworms, even tomato hornworms, because people that grow tomatoes or peppers in the summertime are seeing these things on their plants, and they are really great magnets for a cool predatory insect called a Cotegia wasp. And then they make these other predatory insects. So you want them to, you don't want to kill them. You want to just relocate them. So whether it's the birds that are using them for their babies in the springtime, or it's the beneficial predatory insects that need to put their eggs into those caterpillars, let's move them rather than kill them. So the first example is a sacrificial bed. Another one is to try to exercise some tolerance for them and pick them off and just put them feed them to the birds. Basically create a place where, the birds are going to come and feed them to the birds. So take them to the birds rather than, letting the caterpillars continue to eat the plants in your garden and hope that a bird finds them. So that's two options. I just let them go for the most part. And, it just never gets, I prescribe to that scenario where I can handle a certain percentage of damage to my leaves, which is like 35%. And by the time that ever happens, it tends to stop. It doesn't tend to get worse. If it did, I would probably spray some BT or some powder BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. It's an organic application, down into the core of the plant where they tend to hide, the predators that are eating the leaves. And then that's it. And then you're not probably killing the caterpillars on the outside, and the birds still have access to it. And even if the birds got access to a caterpillar that had BT on it, it wouldn't hurt the bird because it's very specific to the caterpillar larva.
That's fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, let's do this giveaway real quick. I'm going to bring up our giveaway tool here, and somebody is going to win a pollinator mix that you can use in your garden. Who is it going to be? All right. You ready? The winner is
Sarah P.
Sarah P. Congratulations. Very excited for you. Please email support@seedtime.us, and we'll make sure that you get that. You can choose between the cool season or warm season pollinator mix. And by the way, that actually is kind of a little plug, because that is from Green Cover. And I believe Jonathan Gooding from Green Cover is going to be sharing with us tomorrow morning about cover cropping. And so that really ties in as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's do one more question, and then we will wrap it up for tonight. Let's see here. We have a question here about what do I do? Any recommendations on how to deal with excessive cats?
Yeah. Three things. A motion activated sprinkler in the area where the cat is frequenting your garden, and they really work. You just got to remember that when they're on, because you're going to get wet too at some point. It's happened to me. So that, that's pretty good, because cats hate water, and that motion activated sprinkler will get them. And so it's, $40 or something like that. The other thing that you can do is, if you have in-ground beds or raised beds, you can buy snow fencing, green colored snow fencing. So if you've driven down a highway and you've seen that fluorescent orange wall of corrugated plastic that stands up, that's the same thing, but it comes in a pine green color and a roll that's 4 feet wide and 50 feet rolls. You can get it on Amazon or whatever. But if you cut that into the piece size that you want, like in my case, I'm speaking firsthand here because I have cats that do that. I cut the pieces, I lay it into the bed or across the top of it, and I pin it down. And what cats are doing, as you know, they're digging into the soil and they're doing their business, or maybe it's even chicken. It doesn't have to be cats. But if you create a barrier that they can't get beneath it to do what they're trying to do, they'll give up. They'll go away. They'll find another place. And I can tell you firsthand, it works like a charm. And the beauty is, you know, that 50-foot roll isn't more than maybe $50, but it's going to last you a lifetime. And you've got 50 feet of it. And so if your beds are 10 feet long, you got 5 beds you can cover with that one roll. And then at the end of the season, I just fold it up and bring it back out the next season. And it works really well. But something else you can do similarly to that is you can buy a livestock panel and cut it to size. So the grid pattern of a livestock panel is larger, like maybe 4 by 4 inches or maybe even more. And, you know, a cat could still get in there, but it really can't. It's still obstructed to what they're trying to do. So they probably wouldn't be interested if they couldn't really freely scratch around and dig holes. But I cut pieces of that before I discovered the snow fencing, and that worked. And I just set that aside at the end of the season or use it for something else, or a trellis, because it has multi-purposes, but it has a great function as a cat barrier. So those are 3 things.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Huge thank you. And let us know in the chat, has this been helpful for you all? Let's give Joe a hand. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to jump in, share this important session with us. I think it was super important. It's important for people to recognize a lot of the whys behind, you know, not just, oh, regenerative, oh, ecological, but hey, there's actually a bigger purpose behind it even.
And I'm a firm believer in the why do behind the how to, because when we understand why, it's one thing to just follow the steps if we think we want to do it. But when we really understand why we're doing that, that's what makes the difference. That's what sustains the change. So
yeah, I know that's what solidifies my purpose.
Yeah.
And the why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Joe. Is there any final words you want to share before we wrap up?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I wish we could have done this sooner. It's not by any fault of yours. It's my crazy schedule, but I've been looking forward to this. Thank you for allowing me to present this topic. I have a lot of things I could talk about, but I'm glad that you guys were on board with this one because, as we've noted, it's super important and it's very timely and it impacts all of us. And so I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to share this.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, friends. Well, that wraps it up for this evening. For those of you that hey, this might be even your first session on. We have so many people that are registered for this event. If you missed a session or you want to capture the replays, we did pin that up at the top of the chat here. And I am going to actually just copy that and paste it into the chat as well for those of you that may be watching on YouTube or on Facebook. Along with the replays comes many of the presenters are sharing their slides, and there's custom note-taking sheets, and we are opening them up this year for a steal of a deal. You can get them all for $25. So last year, we literally had people pay full price, $198 for all of the replays of last year's summit. So this is a significant discount this year compared to last year. And if you have not checked it out as well, we do have a spring garden success kit. I'll go ahead and just share that real quick as well. I'm not going to, I decided let's skip the little seed time demo. We can fit that in tomorrow. We'll fit in another little seed time demo for you all. I just recognize that the time is late and we do need to wrap it up for this evening. I wanted to make sure that we gave Joe the extra time there for him to be able to finish out that presentation, which is super important. But for those of you that are interested in just launching your garden off with a bang, we have a spring gardening success kit that we are doing for up to 50% off. You can it includes 25 seed packets of your choice. You pick which ones you want, lifetime or yearly access to the Seed Time Garden Planner. and early access to done for you customized garden sequence plans that are one of the best ways to keep your garden filled all season long. So you don't want to leave that space empty. You want to keep plants in it, not just for the ecological benefits, but also for production. You get to eat off of the garden all season or all year round. There's training in there on how to grow food all year round. Some pretty awesome bonus discounts, free discounts for life in the Seed Time store, or free seeds for life at the membership level. And we're also going to do a bonus live garden planning implementation workshop for anyone who jumps in and grabs this. Like I've mentioned before, but one of the biggest challenges that we see gardeners facing when it comes to planning a productive garden is timing, clarity, organization, and confidence. And this kit just addresses each of those areas. And we're giving you tools and resources to take those challenges away and help you know what to do, when to do it without having to think about it, have the clarity and the confidence to do it and to grow an amazing garden. So if you want that, jump over to seedtime.us/kit. We'll post that in the chat here as well. Get the kit, seedtime.us/kit. And that's going to wrap it up for tonight. Huge thank you to everyone who has stuck with us through this last session of today. It's been a lot of fun, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Don't miss tomorrow's morning session. Tomorrow, Jonathan Gooding is going to be sharing about cover cropping. It's really a great extension from what we've just been talking about this evening, continuing on with ecological practices that you can use in your garden. So you're not going to want to miss that. All right. I think that wraps it up for this evening. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Have you ever dreaded putting together a raised bed before? Well, now you don't have to. Introducing the Grow Right Garden, no tools needed, raised bed. All you have to do is take your panels, overlap them, take your rod, slide it down through the slots, and voila, you have a sturdy connection point. There's no screwdrivers, no sockets, just connect the panels and you're done in minutes. Anyone, regardless of age or skill level, can assemble the entire bed in 10 minutes or less. It's made of thick, durable, USDA regulated, paint coated steel, so it's made to last season after season. Once you're set, you're ready to plant your favorite flowers, veggies, or whatever else you like to grow. So if you're ready to make gardening simple, head over to growrightgarden.com and check out our no tools, no hassle